So here is another Codewars problem, very simple because of course it's marked with 7 KYU. I'm not too sure how to pronounce it. I guess it's Q or something, or KYU, but the higher it is, the less the difficulty. So this is called the Statin measure. Now, the Statin measure, so if we show the description of this problem here, the Statin measure is nothing but going through an array and finding how many times a 1 is found in the array. So we're going to have a count which stores the amount of ones actually included within the array itself. And if, of course, well, after we store the count of how many ones there are, we're going to have a concrete number. And then we actually want to go back again and then store how many times that number occurred. So here we have 2 ones in the array, but of course, so two would be our concrete variable, and then we go back and we search for that concrete variable, how many times that concrete variable occurred. So 1 occurred in the array twice, and then we go back and we search for 2 and we return the count of how many times that occurred, and that's the Statin measure. So we'll go ahead and we'll come here and we'll try. And it seems like I've already written code, but I'll erase that momentarily so that I can actually do this again. And this actually summarizes it. We want to count the number of ones in the array, and that number is stored in a variable called n, and we want to return how many times n appears in the array. So I'm sure we could do this in a more sophisticated manner, but I'm just going to use 2 for loops because I'm just starting out here. But so we're going to have, so first we're going to search for ones, which will search for ones, the count of which will be stored in n. Okay, is that fine? So we're going to have int n is equal to 0. So we're going to have another for loop, and the for loop will essentially, if of course, well, it's actually not called, it's called ARR, it's not called nums. So if ARR of I is essentially equal to 1, then we want to increment count by 1, right? And I'll just write this in a better fashion here, more readable, I guess. So we'll increment count by 1. And so this gives me how many ones there are in the array. And then we'll have another for loop, and we'll call this Statin. And this will essentially be us iterating through the length of the array again, which is probably not the most efficient thing to do. But, and of course, note that it's called ARR. So if ARR of I is essentially equal to, well, if it's equal, okay, so it seems like I must have went too fast here, but n, it will actually be holding how many times 1 occurs in the array. So I actually want to increment n each time, not a variable called count, which doesn't even exist. And Statin will essentially, Statin will be how many times n occurred. So we'll say that if ARR of I equals n, then we'll actually increment Statin by 1. And after this is done, I'm sure we can just return